Descent, FreeSpace, The Great War, and FreeSpace 2 are space combat flight sims by Volition released in 1998 and 1999. When Parallax Software, developers of the original Descent, split into two companies, company founder and programmer Michael Koulis, credited with the original Descent idea, would found Volition, and along with 3D programmer Adam Pletcher and other developers from the original team, would develop Descent FreeSpace. I don't know why, but I'm weirdly fond of Volition's company logo, even if it does resemble an androgynous version of the Mussolini face. FreeSpace has a lot of things to which I say, si. Having little in common with the original Descent, the game was actually a love letter to the genre-defining combat flight sims of the 90s, getting most of its ideas from the foundational X-Wing vs TIE Fighter series by LucasArts, and a healthy dose of the Wing Commander series from Origin. Like its predecessors, it features a simple flight model focusing largely on dogfights against similarly sized ships, supported by capital ships that would reach potentially enormous sizes, and a comprehensive set of commands giving a vast amount of control over your ship's systems. Typically, I like to cover more overlooked games to shine a light on the unknown. Though FreeSpace 2 was critically well received, it nevertheless succumbed to poor sales. But far from being dead, it enjoys an energetic old age even today. In 2002, Volition released the source code, and to this day, community projects revitalize the game with new and reworked content. FreeSpace 2 is both a living game and a platform for mods that change its assets and even flight model to make wholly new experiences, some even with professional level voice acting, and many from familiar settings like Battlestar Galactica, Babylon 5, or Star Wars. The engine is still being updated, with downloads easily being managed through a launcher called Knossos.net, providing modern graphics and peripheral support, and giving access to a library that includes complete HUD and texture upgrades of both the game's vanilla campaigns and mission packs. So though I typically tend to focus on forgotten games, this time I choose to look at a game that succeeds in carrying itself into the present, a game that could possibly live forever in a state of constant rejuvenation. Sometimes a desire for a game that remains forever fresh has sometimes led me to indulge in live service games that try to tap into this want, but these games often seek to endlessly drip feed you tiny morsels of enjoyment within a hamster wheel of tedium. There's something comforting in knowing whenever I'm in the mood for 90s dogfighting, there'll probably be an up-to-date version of FreeSpace, and some fresh mods to maybe check out. You can purchase FreeSpace 2 on GOG and download Knossos.net, point it to your game files to start, set up your joysticks so the game can see them, and be sure to download the FS Port Media VPS and FreeSpace Upgrade Media VPS from the Discovery tab to play FreeSpace 1 and 2 fully ported and remastered. Let's talk about how it plays. The space combat sim holds a special place in my heart. It's not intending to simulate anything in any way realistic. What we see instead is modern dogfighting transposed into a space setting. Specialized aircraft such as fighters, bombers, and interceptors launched from a carrier ship for close-range engagements, combined with the visibility and freedom of open space with nowhere to hide. Here you find the thrills of meeting your foes head-on, whether that be fighter to fighter as equals, or surgically striking at enormous command vessels, like a hunter weakening a larger prey. The pleasures of the space combat sim is that of the hunt, of chasing down your enemies and dispatching them efficiently, of running away and outmaneuvering your enemy, all in the freedom of space where there is almost nowhere to hide. Without countermeasures, when a missile locks on, so often your only recourse is to try to dash madly at angles with bursts of your afterburner, while a missile is inexorably locked on the heat of your ship's smouldering anus. These are the pleasures to be found in a space combat sim. FreeSpace directly lifts from its inspirations and refines them. The ability to cripple systems and issue commands, it inherits from its lineage with Wing Commander. Though the ability to target specific systems was a development from X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, FreeSpace introduces further improvements by allowing you to command your squad mates to disarm or disable a ship. The ability to balance power between weapons and shields with obvious trade-offs also comes from the X-Wing and TIE Fighter series. FreeSpace's twist was to add the ability to redirect engines for faster top speed and quicker afterburner recharge. And as per Frank Herbert's Dune, to paraphrase, the tripod is the most unstable of structures, and the need to react to enemies by dynamically rebalancing your systems stokes a constant passive alertness and mindfulness. It's a good way to constantly engage the player by giving them added control, and even Elite Dangerous would go on to use a similar power balance system when it released 16 years later. This also maps comfortably to the various thumbsticks of modern joysticks. X-Wing vs TIE Fighter also allowed you to reinforce front or rear shields, while FreeSpace expanded this to include all 4 directions. As a former Elite Dangerous player myself, this was personally a little too much to handle on top of the energy management, and something I'd frequently forget to use until it was too late. There are also various buttons for targeting friendlies, enemies, subsystems, bombs, VIP targets, all of which can be easily mapped to various buttons or joystick hats. Further, there are numerous buttons for managing speed, in particular, the ability to match speed with your target to allow you to maintain a certain distance for purposes of chase or formation flight. Although the game likely expects you to use this constantly, this was a golden opportunity to play with a new toy, the Hosis Evo Next Omni Throttle, which, once configured in Kenosis.net, worked perfectly without the need for any other external utilities like VJoy or Joystick Gremlin. Although it's more than I would typically spend on a controller, it's an incredible dual stick setup that I love to find any excuse to use, although it's more suited towards omnidirectional flight with lateral thrusters, something the ships in vanilla FreeSpace do not have. The FreeSpace flight model and combat style is firmly in the vein of its predecessors, which were themselves based off the fighter planes of World War II. Engagements tend to be very close range, as you close the distance and try to line up your sights with a bogey that dips and dives, and there's a very good chance you will scrape into your squad mate doing the same thing. Or sometimes the AI just has very peculiar thoughts about personal space. Although never actually used within the main campaign itself, within the bindings you can actually map lateral thrusters, as well as the glide button, which turns on inertia for thrusters, a feature perhaps inspired by Auto Glide introduced in Wing Commander 3, and familiar to Elite Dangerous players as Flight Assist Off. Some mods make excellent use of these, notably FreeSpace Turquoise, a somewhat dated mod that redoes the entire FreeSpace 2 campaign to include lateral flight. Missions are as you would expect, with objectives that might involve attacking, defending, and escorting targets, or even just investigating an area and scanning some cargo. All familiar objectives of flight sims. Just as in X-Wing vs TIE Fighter, you are also awarded shiny badges for completing certain objectives, which might be hidden but get hinted at in the debriefings, and a big part of the hold-up for the video was endlessly restarting to try to achieve these, particularly during FreeSpace 1's campaign and other add-on content. The first FreeSpace makes these goals almost unachievable, while FreeSpace 2 is far better balanced on the difficulty side. A large part of the difficulty in achieving these objectives is that escort targets often can only take 3 or 4 hits, and attackers will usually teleport in within firing distance already. Often it's a roll of the dice if your own wing will be in position of distraction to prevent them attacking any escort targets and immediately destroying them. In other missions, it might be a roll of the dice if any friendlies survive at all, resulting in an endless retreat before finally succumbing to a torrent of laser fire. This is particularly painful on some missions that force you into a roll, such as that of a bomber, only for your escort to be dead before you can even make a run, leaving you to deal with an angry swarm in a thing that can barely turn. They didn't consider the AI to have much need of upgrading between 1 and 2, and inconsistent or downright suicidal teammates can be problematic. The game is at least customizable, with multiple difficulty levels that can be changed mid-campaign, and if you continue failing multiple times, the option to skip. The game gets so many other things right, learning studiously from its already accomplished predecessors and refining where needed. Ships handle responsively with a maneuverability dictated by their role and weight, and have distinct profiles, making quick visual identification simple. You will curse when you see the profile of a dragon darting through the void, slippery as a serpent, and conversely cheer when you see a squad of lumbering basilisks, ready to be crushed like toddlers, evil ones. Hidden conditions enable the damage to, or loss of enemy ships, translate to different situations in future missions, or in some rare cases, following instructions can make another future mission tougher, giving a very minor dynamic quality to what is otherwise a linear overarching experience. You can also customize loadout to different extents as dictated by a squad specialization or mission requirements, providing a great deal of variety through the lengthy campaigns. A handful of red alert missions also add extra challenge by sending your fighter into the next mission before a proper repair and resupply. Probably the greatest achievement for a game of its time, and maybe since, is the vast scale of the game's ships, which ramps up considerably through the series. This never felt more apparent than when I was escorting a capital ship, and cursing the length of time it took for my fighter to cross its vast length in order to defend every angle from attack. Its apparent gameplay was at the forefront of the game's mission design. Just as new toys give greater options as the campaign progresses, the developers at various times take away some of the tools you most rely upon with various events that force you to rise to the occasion. For example, flying with limited visibility or interference might prevent your enemies appearing on radar. In another mission you can't lock on, rendering missiles useless. As someone who loves a good, fair space laser fight, I was happy to rise to the occasion. At one point there's even a sort of stealth mission with a captured fighter where you have to avoid getting too close to patrols. Some of the new weapons introduced in FreeSpace 2 are creatively repurposed in various mods, which bring their own unique mechanics or flight models. New flak weapons in FreeSpace 2 allow possible for a compelling visual reproduction of some of those battles from Battlestar Galactica. And beam weapons are perfectly suited to numerous anime homages. All this to say that mods can massively shake up difficulty and experience. The vanilla experience is already considerably meaty, with FreeSpace The Great War campaign taking place over 3 acts, containing 29 missions and a further 12 missions in the Silent Threat expansion. The FreeSpace 2 campaign takes place over 30 missions, with a further 5 optional missions with the Special Operations Command and another 4 missions in the Operation Templar add-on campaign. Let's delve into the story of FreeSpace. Neither FreeSpace 1 or 2 contain a shred of plot or background in their manuals. Most information comes from cinematics, dialogue, gameplay, and some limited descriptions in the tech room. Some information can also be found in the FreeSpace Reference Bible, a document created likely to help science fiction writers who wrote short stories as part of a marketing campaign. Neither games have anything to do with the world of the original Descent games, and even the meaning of the word free space is never provided or, I think, even used within the game itself. Here's what we glean on the background before the events of the first game. Society was galvanized with the development of a spaceship drive able to finally unlock a legacy amongst the stars. There was a limitation, however, that travel between 2 different star systems could only be performed by capital ships traveling via naturally occurring wormholes through subspace, called nodes, with smaller ships being limited to subspace hops only within a given star system. This technology allowed Earth to proliferate across the stars until it encompassed a galactic state, dubbed the Galactic Terran Alliance, or GTA. Soon this GTA encountered their first intelligent alien race, in the form of the parliamentary Vasudan Empire. There's no description of how the war started, but records indicate some sort of hostility arising from Terran mishandling of the Vasudans' extremely ritualized cultural conventions. The reference Bible mentions it being deliberately vague to allow room for prequels. At the beginning of Descent FreeSpace, this war has been raging for 14 years, and despite the Galactic Terran Alliances taking large losses in their last engagement, you gear up to carry on the fight. As we enter the game proper, the intro movie shows a terrified pilot being chased by fighters from a third unknown force. This unknown force is content to bide its time in the shadows for now. Following training, you undertake a series of missions against the Vesudans, patrolling for hostile activity, attacking supply lines, and putting down a dangerous enemy ace hiding in the interference of an asteroid field. You can skip ahead to the timestamp below to hear my thoughts on the story, or hold tight for a full spoilered reveal. We have our first indication of some dissenting opinion within our ranks when human defectors led by Lieutenant McCarthy steal the prototypes to a powerful new laser, the Avenger, shortly to become a mainstay of your loadout. Within the course of the campaign, this is one of the few occasions where the FreeSpace 1 story presents you with an individual with a name instead of the movements of named ships and technologies. You assist in the capture of the defector for trial, and you are tasked with assisting the escort of the weapon prototype aboard the science cruiser Plato. As you begin to assault an isolated Vesudan cruiser in the path of the convoy, completely unknown enemies jump in, quickly dispatching the Vesudan cruiser before turning its attention to the Plato, which you are hapless to defend. These new enemies can't be targeted and can barely be scratched through their shields, but there's a bonus objective that can boost the morale of your forces if you destroy just one of them, which requires some drastic measures. Despite the loss of the Plato, the weapon prototype manages to survive aboard an escape pod, entering into production for subsequent missions. The new enemies are dubbed Shivans and begin to push into contested systems along the Terran-Vesudan front, wiping out whatever they encounter. After repelling Vesudan attacks on the capital ship Galatea, your squad is dispatched to investigate a Shivan supply depot for crucial data to calibrate your sensors to target the aliens. The cargo is booby-trapped, however, and explodes shortly after scanning. But in your debriefing, some other unnamed hero succeeds where you failed, gaining the intel needed to modify your ships to target the Shivans. As the extent of the danger reveals itself, Terrans and Vesudans put behind their hostilities and call a ceasefire. Under the auspices of a joint team of Terran and Vesudan scientists, a new shield is developed. The developers of FreeSpace, familiar with the quote that losers talk tactics, generals talk logistics, don't miss an opportunity in making you escort the fragile prototypes for your next mission. The birth of this Terran-Vesudan alliance does not mean an end to hostile Vesudan ships, however. As the Hammer of Light, followers of a fanatical cult whose prophecies foretell the coming of the destroyers hide themselves amongst your new allies, waiting to ambush. Equipped with the jointly developed shields, your next orders are to strike back the insurgency by attacking a supply depot and attempting to capture the Hammer of Light cruiser Ramesses. Before you are successful, the Shivan destroyer Tyrannus enters the fray and destroys the Ramesses before it can be seized. The priority shifts to attempting to capture the Shivan destroyer Tyrannus, who has been menacing local operations. You defend a ship attempting to breach the bulkhead, which proves unsuccessful, so Command agrees to tow the Shivan ship back to Tombo Station. FreeSpace The Great War's second act opens with what we later find out are the memoirs of a dead race, dubbed the Ancients, who had millennia ago fought the Shivans.
When the destroyers came for us, we attacked. Never had we been defeated. They were like the others, strange, hideous, resisting, fighting. Only these were not like the others. They did not die.
We soon learn Tombo Station has been attacked and the captured Shivan vessel lost. Your new objectives are to defend the evacuating survivors. The following missions involve recouping from the Shivan attacks and striking back at the Hammer of Light insurgents and consolidating the GTA's position. Following this, Command settles on a more modest target and captures a damaged Shivan fighter at a Shivan repair depot. The GTA seizes the dreaded and maneuverable Dragon and with it are able to slip behind enemy lines to scan various ships that appear to be staging for an upcoming attack. In particular, the Demon-class Ava destroyer, which will be your target for the next mission. When that deed is done, you barely have time to appreciate the explosion when you are pulled back to defend the Galatea in a hopeless battle that ends when the Lucifer introduces itself, bringing lasers to bear and carving the Galatea up like a delicious doner kebab. Shortly after this, the Lucifer will travel to Vasuda Prime for baklava and coffee, by which I mean 4 billion lives on the Vasudan homeworld will be snuffed. This brings a close to FreeSpace's second act. At the opening of FreeSpace's final act, military efforts are redirected towards rescuing the survivors and defending any Vasudan assets in the way of Shivan forces. Hope seems all but lost.
Get away now. The ancient legends are true.
The Shivan super destroyer the Lucifer lurks in the shadows as an unstoppable threat. Its shields are impenetrable, its weapons overwhelming, and it proves it again by destroying Beta Aquila Station. As the Shivans annihilate the Vasudan homeworld before pushing on to Earth, your squad pushes through a weak point in the Shivan forces only to receive the red alert to rush off to where a small flicker of hope has been found in the dust. Some scientists have uncovered the records of the Ancients, the alien species who fought the Shivans millennia ago. From these records, they were able to determine how to track a capital ship, the Lucifer, through subspace where its shields wouldn't function. Necessity is the mother of invention, and there is no greater necessity than survival. Briefings inform you of further technological breakthroughs, notably allowing inter-system jumps for spacefighters. The final mission of FreeSpace The Great War looks spectacular. Taking place in what's not called FreeSpace, it's not a particularly challenging mission. All ships, including the Shivans, have no shields, and it feels like you have to fight the pull of the wormhole's tide. I'm not honestly sure even if that's true, but the background makes it distracting enough to seem like it is. It's pretty cool nevertheless, and notably it's the only occasion when the Shivans are green, which, as everyone knows, means ready, go, or read. The FreeSpace expansion Silent Thread adds a further 12 missions to the campaign. These missions induct you into the Galactic Terran Intelligence for some covert operations. We're talking the heavy stuff. When a battle breaks out between Terran and Vasudan fighters, you are dispatched to provide a speedy outcome before it reaches a communication node and escapes to command.
Your objective will be to sanitize the area. Destroy everything but the GTI communications terminal. All voices must be silenced to preserve the Terran-Vasudan alliance.
Unfortunately, one shuttle, the Einstein, manages to get away, and it's a case of murdering everyone who interacts with it on each of its pit stops, until you have to pull off the attack as the ship self-destructs, with massive amounts of explosives on board. And using the explosion as cover, the occupants slip away on escape pods. It's while attempting to retrieve these escape pods that you're attacked by unknown ships of clearly Terran design, with some sort of stealth technology preventing lock-on and giving only a faint radar signal. Once again, you are at a technological disadvantage against a foe. The stealth ships seem to be GTI prototype stealth fighters. In fact, the Einstein was not scheduled to be in the area at all. But you have little time to consider this before being pulled away for supporting missions against the Shivans and Hammer of Light. After kicking ass and chewing gum, you're briefed on what you probably suspected, a conspiracy within the ranks of the GTI. What comes to be known as the Hades Rebellion. This is a coup going to the upper echelons in order to overthrow Earth's government and dissolve the treaty with the Vasudans. Your next mission is to scan the wreckage in the area of the first Shivan attack. Command doesn't say why. When you arrive, you're surprised by a pitched battle between GTI ships and Shivan forces. Your debriefing reveals that GTI had perhaps already salvaged the wreckage, but their ultimate goals remain unknown. As the war with the Shivans continues, the rogue GTI are at last tracked to a secret facility known as Jotunheim, where they are suspected to have been researching Shivan technology since humanity's first encounter. There you destroy the enemy forces and put a stop to the Hades rebellion. When the dust settles, the mission briefing inserted by the FreeSpace project gives a short message acknowledging actually this campaign kind of sucks, and to check out the fan-created version Silent Threat Reborn, which rewrites the story, missions, and even re-records the briefings to present a narrative that's better balanced and fits better within the context of FreeSpace 2. With the conclusion of the FreeSpace campaign, there is a period called the Reconstruction before the next game picks up. Both civilizations struggle to recover from the devastation wrought by the Shivans. Not only was the Vasudan homeworld lost, but the collapse of the subspace portal while destroying the Leviathan had cut off contact with Earth, making its fate unknown. Following the loss of the Terran homeworld, the Galactic Terran Alliance collapsed into various squabbling blocks before reconstituting again under the Galactic Terran Vasudan Alliance, with a common representative body and a common galactic law under the Beta Aquila Convention, with separate Terran navies working together with the Vasudans under one command structure. Though a success, it nevertheless had its opponents. The FreeSpace 2 add-on, Operation Templar, is actually set around this period, where you assist the Vasudans in putting their house in order with 4 additional missions focused on the last holdouts of the Hammer of Light. These 4 missions were originally intended for co-op. Under the newly formed GTV-A, you prevent the capture of a Vasudan destroyer, along with the plans for a stealth fighter. You try to prevent a hostage attempt, and track the cult to their last holdout where you rescue a Vasudan High Admiral and put an end to the insurgency for good. Years later, a far more deadly threat emerges in the form of Admiral Bosch. Once someone who fought against the rebel GTI during the Hades Rebellion, 18 months before the beginning of FreeSpace 2, he begins a military coup, opposed to any sort of cooperation with the Vasudans and speaking of an imperialistic vision for mankind, preying on the discontent of the lost generation who had grown up during the chaotic times of the Reconstruction, still lamenting the loss of Earth. From his base in Polaris, he would create the fascistic Neo-Terran Front, or NTF, which would grow to encompass Sirius, Regulus, and comprise a formidable fleet in its own right. This sets the stage for FreeSpace 2, which distinguishes itself from the previous game by actually having an antagonist with a face and a history, and by giving your squad names and differently voiced commanding officers. When FreeSpace 2 opens, you have been assigned to the 53rd Hammerheads, a space superiority squad stationed on the GTD Aquitaine and flying the latest Terran Vasudan jointly developed fighter. 32 years have passed since Earth has been inaccessible by jump node. We begin humbly enough, by defending convoys and striking at NTF supply depots. We track Bosch's command frigate, the Iceni, to an NTF asteroid base, but the Iceni is nowhere to be found. At least, until the asteroid splits apart and a ship emerges from the rock. The failures in intelligence and the ship itself leaves your commanding officer bewildered. Your next mission, you are transferred to the Heavy Attack Squadron, the 107th Ravens, to replenish their recently depleted numbers. You move to secure a newly discovered subspace node built by the ancients in the Gamma Draconis system, of particular interest to Terrans searching for a way to reach Earth. But first, they must find out where it leads. You join the expedition, met with poor visibility produced by a dense nebula. As the ships fumble around blindly through the mist, they run into the Shivans, but also a science cruiser, the Trinity, which was noted as a ship that had defected to the NTF. The captain, Remig, pleads the Fifth.
As a prisoner of war, my rights are protected under the Beta Aquila Convention. I will answer no questions, Command.
An overwhelming Shivan force takes out the Trinity and the boarding party sent to secure the POWs, leaving any questions unanswered. Through several cutscenes, Admiral Bosch reveals himself to be a great fan of the monologue, musing on the ancients and the Shivans, wondering if Shivans are some sort of cyclical cosmic destroyer, some force of nature eternally crushing any civilization that prospers in the ruins of the last, like its namesake, the cosmic destroyer Shiva.
What if there had been countless races, stretching back into infinity, And like the 9 cities of Troy, each civilization had been built on the rubble of one that came before. Each annihilated by the Shivans. The ancients died 8,000 years ago. As humanity emerged from its Neolithic infancy, they believed their voyage across the sea of stars woke the dragon that slept beneath the waves. That the Shivans were birthed from the flux of subspace, and their destruction was the revenge of an angry cosmos.
As the GTV-A probe around blindly in the nebula for Shivan forces, like a foot sweeping for spiky Lego in the dark, the metaphor goes all wrong, as instead they find an enormous monster lying in wait, like a crocodile.
I mean, people are entitled to their sexual proclivities, I mean, let there be 1,000 blossoms bloom as far as I'm concerned, But I ain't spending any time on it, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person is torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
You then get transferred to a new group, the 242nd Sunnyside Kings, focused on interception. Your first mission is to defend Enif Station from an NTF assault. You zip around the battlefield in surgical strikes, destroying the beam lasers of the NTF cruisers. At the last moment, a vast ship heaves through a subspace portal, like the enormous head of a crowning baby. But before you can fire on it, it does turn out to be a baby, the beautiful biracial baby of combined Terran and Vasudan science, the Colossus. With this new beautiful biracial baby, they take the fight to the rebels, crushing their fleet led by Admiral Koth at Epsilon Pegasi, and blocking the Polaris jump node, forcing the rebels of Polaris to surrender, though Admiral Bosch still remains at large. At this point you are asked if you would like to volunteer with an assignment with Special Operations Command, everyone's favourite morally questionable division. We meet Lieutenant Commander Christopher Snipes to go on an undercover mission to find out more information about the NTF's ETAC project. While masquerading as NTF pilots, using encrypted channels we gather information by scanning the science cruiser Iceni and the nearby Hinton before an unplanned Vasudan attack occurs. You have no choice but to keep up the cover and fire on your Vasudan allies, which turns out to be a Vasudan admiral who knew about the covert operation and took his own initiative against the NTF. But the timing of the attack risks blowing your cover. In the next mission, you assist the rebels in escorting a ship called the Sunder, only to take out the escort and capture it while tricking the NTF into thinking it was destroyed by an enemy attack.
Mayday! Mayday! Reactor core breach on all fighters! Half the squad is down!
Special Operations always gets the fun jobs. After this, your fellow covert operative, Lieutenant Commander Snipes, gets reassigned, and you join the rebels on an attack on a GTV-A supply depot. The situation comes to a head when the rebels force you to fire on a civilian transport.
We are evacuating civilians to Alpha Centauri. An attack on this vessel is a violation of the Beta Aquila Convention.
Show them what you think of the Beta Aquila Convention, pilot. You're a cold-blooded killer, Alpha 1, but we know all about you. You set us up in Polaris, and you destroyed the Sunder. You are hereby stripped of your wings and all privileges bestowed upon you as an officer of the Neo-Terran Front.
You should probably respect the Beta Aquila Convention.
You willfully fired upon and destroyed a civilian transport. Allied commanders expressed its shock and dismay that an Allied officer would indulge in the slaughter of innocent people.
Even if you don't do the war crime, your cover is now fully blown, and you return to your activities in scouting the nebula and weakening Shivan forces. The Terran forces push back the NTF forces from the ancient subspace portal, which they have dubbed the Colossus, after the site of the ancient Minoan city. The Alliance believes that Bosch had discovered ancient materials that had allowed him to activate the portal with the Trinity. As FreeSpace 2's second act opens, we join the 134th Barracudas, a combat evaluation unit Fighting in the nebula requires the development of new forms of technology. This includes new ships like a stealth fighter and new weapons such as the TAG missile, used so capital ships can obtain precise locks for their laser beams in the nebula, and a new way to get killed by your own side. After testing weapons and repelling Shivan forces, you are assigned to the 64th Raptors, specializing in bombing and bombing support, to repel Bosch's attempts to break through the Knossos subspace portal. We undertake some missions to soften the enemy before the NTF launches their attack. When they do, an overwhelming amount of NTF firepower allows Admiral Bosch to slip through the Knossos portal and escape into the nebula. As the Terran officers search for Bosch in the nebula, you are transferred to a Vasudan squad, the 203rd Scorpions, for an officer exchange program to foster greater cooperation amongst the GTVA. Here you have the opportunity to fly Vasudan ships and use Vasudan weapons, which suck. Sure, some of the ships do have a unique sort of charm, but their weapons have recoil, which is infuriating. Your squad is tasked with the reconnaissance of the nebula and containing the Shivans, and we push through the mist until we encounter another vast Shivan juggernaut lurking, dubbed the Sathanas, for which we prepare to mount an attack. The Sathanas pushes through GTVA containment towards the Knossos portal, and the decision is made to destroy the node using Meson warheads and trap it in the nebula rather than risk escape into an occupied system.
Congratulations, Rennet. You just saved millions of lives out there. You'll get a hero's welcome back at the fleet.
With all due respect, man, this is no time for celebrations. The destruction of this ancient...
The plan fails as the Sathanas manages to stabilize a portal and pushes through to Gamma Draconis.
I'm picking up an incoming jump signature. Sathanas is entering the system.
That's impossible. Request immediate status update.
Your bomber races to disable some of the beams on its spiked arms before it can encounter the Colossus to finish it off. In Admiral Bosch's final log, Bosch reveals his past and his plans for the future.
Our encounter with the Shivans has vindicated all I have fought for these past 30 years. My life's work has been achieved. I have created the technology to enable communication between the Shivans and the human race. Although our first contact was rudimentary and crude, I have initiated the first phase of a new alliance with the Destroyers, an alliance upon which the fate of humanity depends.
Your Vasudan squad moves to capture the Iceni to find out more about the ETAC device. When you arrive at the scene, a Shivan Azrael transporter is docked with the Iceni. The Shivans undock and begin to fire on the ship, as the terrified NTF crew beg to be saved.
You've got to get us out of here now!
The Shivans had boarded and started killing everyone. Admiral Bosch and his subordinates had supposedly left safely aboard the Shivan transports. You chase the transports through the mist, only for them to escape through another Knossos subspace portal. That's the last you'll ever see of Admiral Bosch. You are called away to defend your old capital ship, the GTD Aquitaine, to which you will soon be reunited. But first you are given the privilege of another tour with Special Operations Command. Commander Snipes, your old buddy in Subterfuge, has sent a coded SOS from the NTF transport, the Grawl, located somewhere within the nebula. Electrical interference messes with your comms and radar. Visibility is poor. You bounce between nav points, fending off Shivan attacks. Finally, you're able to rescue Snipes, who accompanies you on the next mission. This is an undercover mission to the site of the second Knossos portal, using captured Shivan ships and bumping into the Shivans rather abruptly as we enter.
Dive! 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 Hit your boilers, pilot!
As always with the Shivans, their operations and goals are unclear. As soon as the squad is detected, Snipes signals the attack, and the squad destroys some ominous devices for unknown purpose, though in the data they are identified as comms nodes. Following this, when you return to the GTD Aquitaine in recognition of your service, you receive your own squadron, the 70th Blue Lions. Although functionally nothing has actually changed. Your main goal shifts to defending refugees fleeing Capella, who are in the path of the oncoming Shivan forces. In briefings, we are told over 80 Shivan juggernauts position themselves around the Capella sun and begin to emit anomalous subspace energies. The Alliance fears this is a new superweapon, and once everyone has been evacuated, they intend to seal off access from Epsilon Pegasi by detonating meson warheads inside the node. The Alliance diverts Shivan attention to Gamma Draconis and then seal access from both sides, trapping them there. During these activities, the pride of the joint Terran-Vasudan fleet, the Colossus, falls under the fire of the Sathanis. In the final mission, you must assist the evacuation of the system and then escape as the subspace node is collapsed, sealing off the vast Shivan fleet at the Gamma Draconis system in a race against time. I think some ships were definitely left behind.
To the pilots and crew, the 70th Blue Lions, GTD Aquitaine. It is my sad duty to report that your squadron leader never reached the Vega system. According to observers, Alpha 1 remained behind so that others might reach the Vega node. The pilot made this decision even after being advised of the impending catastrophe.
True and based. We end the campaign with the hope of returning home, apprehensive of what we might find there. Outside of the question of Earth, it feels like there are various unresolved issues. What actually happened with Bosch and his lieutenants? And what could he have possibly negotiated with the Shivans? What was the goal of the Shivans? It's suggested they have biomechanical qualities, and Bosch speculates they might be driven to destroy any sufficiently advanced civilization to allow the next civilization the space to flourish. Some theories suggest the Shivans might themselves be searching for their home. There are also moments when the Shivans seem to act with a strange sense of purpose, like when you're attempting to capture the Hammer of Light ship the Ramesses, and the Tyrannus jumps in, almost on cue as if to prevent it. What's more, there are over 80 Shivan juggernauts that jumped away from the Capellan sun when it exploded, and it seemed a little too early to celebrate yet. After taking in the breadth and scope of the official FreeSpace universe, where do I stand? In many ways, the story is largely functional. The focus is rarely on characters, but instead on resources and the strategic movement of assets. FreeSpace 2 tries to work in a slightly more personal feel, with different voices giving briefings depending on where you're assigned, and Commander Snipes is unique in being a squad member with a recurring role. It's very hard to really feel the sort of weak characterization hurts the game though, as the plot is always in service to the mechanics, keeping the game fresh by disempowering or empowering the player over the course of various missions, or just playing with the spectacle of scale, which it does very well. It's not exactly deep, but it very much feels that it gets the job done by being an homage to the space combat flight sim, and a decent setup for a battle between a couple of different alien races. It's kept fresh by this rather clever technological arms race woven through the plot. If you're considering continuing the story, there's a fan mod called Blue Planet that a lot of people love that does just that, which also features pretty decent natural chatter between the squad, and it's a nice change from the more impersonal approach FreeSpace takes. Here's the part I keep open to recommend similarly themed media or ramble on some adjacent ideas, but the best avenue to explore the theme of ship-to-ship combat is the game's expansive mod library. The Battlestar Galactica mods Diaspora and Aerolon is Burning are extremely professional and feel very authentic to the spirit of the TV series. It also uses the lateral thrusters, which I remember from the show and which I always like to see, and the ships are very maneuverable. There's also excellent voice acting. I was so gripped by the original show and the way it teased its mysteries, playing with the themes of mysticism and science, free will and determinism, politics and passion. So too does Babylon 5 hold a special place in my heart, presenting as it did a less utopian vision than Star Trek while grappling with sometimes similar themes. The Babylon 5 project, though not nearly as visually striking as the Battlestar Galactica project, slightly tweaks flight mechanics to also include glide and lateral movement, and allows you to play a variety of historical missions set in the universe. Some of these mods can be very difficult, with missiles being rare, often limited to under 4 per ship, but fatal. A few other tries led me to believe some of this collection mods might be a little unbalanced. Babylon 5 is such an underrated series, and there was a remaster of the TV show not too long ago that kind of calls to me right now. In addition, there are also mods set in familiar IPs like Star Wars The Original Trilogy and Star Fox Event Horizon and the Wing Commander saga. There are also unique settings like the anime-style Wings of Dawn and Dimensional Eclipse with its darting jets that offer very different flavors of game. All these mods really do deserve their own video. As interested as I am in preserving the memory of video games, some people balk at the fact I might play a game in a stretch widescreen instead of a letterbox, or that I don't go to other traditionalist extremes like original hardware or resolutions. The reason is that when I reflect on my memories, I don't remember the square screens with their scan lines. In my mind, I still have the impression that they were shiny and new, and took up the entirety of my focus. Looming larger than life, within the mind's eye theatre screen of remembrance as limitless as the divine. And so I tend to try to wrench those old games into some semblance of a modern state, into full upscaled widescreen, which is as close as I can get to the infinite. In my memory they felt fresh, and I want them to still feel fresh. There's some arguments against this, particularly some PS1 and PS2 titles that use their limitation for aesthetics, but I don't want to belabor an already long video. Thanks to the efforts of its community, FreeSpace is perennially great looking, particularly with remastered textures. The game also exhibits a visual design aiming for player clarity. Terran ships are unmistakably human, resembling the profiles of modern-day fighter jets, while Vesudans have a unique style, sometimes resembling World War II planes, sometimes resembling a blocky river barge or Arabic dhow, made in strange earthy coloured metals. The Shivans are an angry red on a sleek black metal, and with the exception of some of its more lumbering craft, its ships are typically angular with spiky appendages resembling those of insects. Combined with the scale differences between some of the ships, FreeSpace communicates itself in an effective visual language. No less simple and effective is the HUD, showing everything you'd typically expect or need to see, and have become mainstays of the genre since. The game's sound does not deviate from the cultural expectations probably set by Star Wars, and which, even if it weren't a homage, we could never reasonably escape from. Can any space game ever sound original? We all know what lasers sound like. They all do some version of pew pew. The missile lock alert will drive you crazy, but it's meant to, I guess.
Check your six.
The music for FreeSpace is credited to Dan Wentz, and the music for FreeSpace 2 is by Dan Wentz and Lee Karras Westcott. And although in no way bad, it's a little unadventurous. It could comfortably sit in any genre of game, in any sort of time period. The voice actors in briefings and mission chatter do an excellent job, striking a good balance between military discipline and human emotion where appropriate, although originally seemed to be recorded at a quite low bitrate.
The 242nd will escort a supply convoy as it makes its rendezvous with the GTVA Colossus.
The FreeSpace project has resulted in a game that has now lived on for almost 3 decades, and served as a platform for entirely new games and narrative experiences. In my introduction, I stated it was comforting to know that whenever I was in the mood, a 90s style of combat flight gameplay has been refined and kept polished and playable to the present day, like a vintage automobile kept in prime condition. Though FreeSpace is considered fairly venerable amongst the games still played and maintained, gaming is still a very young form of art, and I have to wonder what next for its legacy if it continues to live through the efforts of its community. Just as in ancient Greece, Homeric bards are believed to have passed down the art and stories of a bygone era in the form of the Iliad and Odyssey, from song to paper to the modern Kindle tablet, I wonder if FreeSpace also will live for thousands of years, to be ported to as yet unknown programming languages and played by future man on advanced holoscreen technologies, revered for its preservation of a unique heritage of space combat dogfighting. Who knows even if its best mods are yet to be written. Anyone with a joystick should buy FreeSpace 2 and download the mod manager Knossos.net. This is named after the ancient artificial subspace portal in the game, and is itself named after the city of the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. Most people interested in ancient history are familiar with the reconstructed ruins of Knossos, the gorgeously vibrant, predominantly red and blue murals in a style that looks like it echoes down to Hellenic pottery, but depicting figures with far more exotic clothing and activities. The reconstructions done by British archaeologist Arthur Evans are beautiful but somewhat contentious amongst modern archaeologists, as I understand it. Some of the guesswork involved in the reconstruction of lost materials was pure fabrication, and some details are irrecoverably lost, but it did help popularize the site for generations to come. Knossos.net and the FreeSpace 2 Open project is in no way a flawed reconstruction like the original Knossos site. Instead, it's still the same game that has never stopped living. It's old-fashioned in some ways, to be sure, but nevertheless, it's timeless, and becoming more beautiful every day, like your mom, and to which I hope will live forever.